when you've got it
It
started.
started.
Okay, great. We're going to talk about a couple of things tonight. We're going to start off with resources. Now, we talked about this before. Resources are both people, human resources, or equipment. So that what you need to do is build the best team that you can. You may have a core team that you've worked with before, and you may need to supplement that team with additional people, whether it's on a full-time basis or on a shorter term basis. Same thing with equipment. Now remember, we're with PMI, we're talking about any kind of project that you can think of. So, think about uh, when a certain piece of equipment would be needed, may be needed multiple times throughout a project. And you, as the project manager, need to make the decisions about when that resource is going to be needed. Can you release it for a while, bring it back in? Exactly what do you need to do to make sure you have the right equipment at the right time? All right. Again, we're talking about predictive projects. Each predictive project is going to have a resource management plan. It's the basics again. It's the win the lottery or get hit by the bus type information. You want to make sure that if someone has to take over the project, that they have the best information possible to continue with the project and bring it in on time. So some of the things that you're going to identify are just the resources that are needed for the project, the people and equipment. Okay? If the people and equipment, excuse me, are outside of the organization, how are you going to acquire them? Are you going to rent? Are you going to be able to hire? Exactly what needs to be done? Okay. Need to identify people's roles and responsibilities. Create a project organization chart. Okay. So who's involved? Who are the stakeholders? What are the reporting relationships for the people who are actually working on the project? And what are they going to be doing? All right. Any training that's required, and any resource controls that need to be adhered to. And it's for non-human resources. Okay. Making sure that they're available as needed. And then one big thing that is often neglected with the project is a recognition plan. Because there are going to be people who are going to do an extremely good job, and we need to recognize that. I was on one project when I was at Motorola. We were upgrading a general purpose processor board for cellular switches, and we actually had 3 celebrations: one in Dallas, one in Phoenix, and one in Chicago. So I got to have a lot of fun on that one. And if you want to take a screenshot about the resource management plan. Okay. So in predictive projects, the project manager is going to assign people to the project, decide what roles and responsibilities they're going to have, and create a team directory, as we said before, the org chart, and the schedule for the project. Now, note that, and you may have a question that relates to this on the test, the project schedules, resource assignments, and budgets are all interrelated and can be created at the same time. Okay, there's no sequence that has to be followed. Right? Uh, you want to consider both technical and soft skills. Uh, one of the big things is you need to make sure people can work together. I mean, somebody might be the most brilliant person in the world, but if they don't have the right soft skills to interact with the rest of the team, it may be uh, reason to look into either if there's a role where they can work alone, or if there's another project that they'd be more valuable on. And then naturally, like with AT&T, we have uh, projects that span the globe. So, time zones have to be taken care of, uh, calendars, especially if you're working with Israel, uh, set Friday at sunset until Monday is, or until Sunday is uh, is off. So we need to make sure that we adhere to what other people's requirements are too. All right. Now, one thing that we will do, uh, especially in adaptive projects, is we will project how many people we have, how many people uh, days per week that we have to work on the project. Same thing for a predictive project. Same way for a hybrid project. Okay, so you need to understand when people are available, when they're not available. Things like training, vacations, uh, excuse me, jury duty. All that needs to be considered within the resource calendar that you create. Okay, and it's not a static document. You're going to be revisiting this. Like I said, with adaptive projects, it's going to be well, every sprint. Okay. And I'll open this up so you can take a screenshot. Okay. Um, for predictive and hybrid projects, there are some responsibility assignment tools. Uh, one of the things is a RACI chart. It's been used for I don't know how many years. Uh, so RACI stands for responsible, accountable, consult, or inform. Okay. So um, responsible uh, talks about team members so that uh, thank you, so that they're the ones who create the deliverables. And each task that, especially in the predictive projects, that's been broken down from the WBS has at least one responsible person, ideally one. Okay. Now they may have people that they're working with, uh, but usually you try to have one person. Okay. Accountable is known as the one throat to choke when things go out of hand. Okay. Um, this is the from leadership and management, uh, and they're responsible for delivering the the work the work product and the value. Excuse me for a second. Okay. In this case, each task has only one accountable person. Okay. Stakeholders are considered people you consult. So uh, you don't need, usually you don't need all the stakeholders, right? You need to make a list of the stakeholders that you need involved with each task or milestone. And, remember the stakeholders' time is usually split between many projects so that we want to minimize the amount of time that we tie up stakeholders. Okay. There are others who may be stakeholders or they may just be interested in the project. Those are the ones that we need to inform. Okay. Usually you don't need to consult them to make decisions about the project, but they have an interest in it. Okay. Has anybody heard of a RACI chart before? Yes or no works.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Here's the definition. All right. All right. We have a quiz.
Okay. Can you go back to that real quick for me?
Yeah. Well, okay. Computer thoughts.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. Is there a question or you just want to take a screenshot?
I just want to get a screenshot on that portion.
Okay. Are you good?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thanks. All right. Fun time. Quiz time. Question is, which of these are true? And the hint is there's more than one that's true. So, teams self-organize to distribute work. True or false?
True.
False. I think that's false because I thought the project manager does that.
Oh, we got them all here.
Oh,
All right, that's true. Adaptive teams can have leaders, and team members are a mix of generalists and specialists, and team members should be T-shaped. Well, that spoiled everything, didn't it? All right. When you need additional resources for a project, we have to make decisions like make, buy, borrow, and sometimes even steel. Okay? So you need to evaluate things like any impact on cost, time, or quality, uh, engaging an external resource, uh, especially with things like software development. You want to make sure that the external resources have at least as good a skill set as the team that you're bringing them in with. Is the need going to be temporary, or will you need that skill set going forward? In which case, you may make a decision to be able to hire somebody rather than just bring in a consultant for a short period of time. With AT&T especially, the way everything's been broken apart and reassembled, you know, we have a very steep learning curve, especially on a lot of the billing systems that we use. So does it make sense to bring in an external resource if they need to be working on this particular area? Or can other people with those particular skills be brought in from within the organization? Eh, Which is this bullet too. Um, what you can do is either bring on additional resources or perhaps outsource some of the deliverables. And the question is, would outsourcing allow the team to focus on what their deliverables need to be? Can you farm out some of the software? Can you farm out some of the construction to a subcontractor? Okay. Uh, it's going to vary from project to project. It's going to vary based on the composition of the project team. So you need to be able, as a project manager, you need to be able to assess what the team's skills are, whether any of this makes sense, if you need additional resources. So what if you are bringing in additional resources, okay, what you'll need to do is do a make or buy analysis. Okay. And this is not just human resources where it would be a make or hire or bring them on temporarily or hire them analysis. It's also, for any industry where you have a project. All right. Does it make sense to make the components that you need, or can you buy them, especially if they're commercial off the shelf? Okay? And remember that the make or buy decisions are part of the procurement strategy. And we're going to let you see what the formal definitions are. Okay. All right. Well, if you have to go outside of your team, what you need to do is plan the procurement strategy. Okay. What you want to do is work with your organization's finance or procurement department. With AT&T, you probably work with procurement. Finance will provide funding. and procurement works with them. Now, especially at AT&T, when we're talking about software, especially, we have a list of pre-approved vendors. Okay, you need to be able to assess the capabilities of the vendors before you request using a new vendor. Now, there are times where you do need to go to a new vendor. If it's a new technology, there may be limited number of vendors within the country, within the world, who can assist with that. Okay. An example would be digitally printing houses, with the concrete printer. Aren't too many organizations out there that can do that large scale digital printing. Okay, 3D printing. On the other hand, if you have to just have some general type of software development, you'll have a list of pre-approved vendors. Okay. Understand how much your sponsor or your procurement department can sign for. You may have to get approval from several levels up. And I'll bore you again. When I had a team at Motorola, I could sign for $50,000 worth of capital equipment, no question. I moved to AT&T. I couldn't even buy a pen. Okay, we had to go through procurement to get pens or paper. Back in the old days where we actually wrote things out in longhand. Okay. Don't go off and invent stuff on your own. Your organization you will have a defined billing process and ways and means of conducting that. You'll have templates that you can use. Okay? This should all be in your repository and be able to take a look at it. We'll talk about a few processes, things like that. If you've got a large project, say a multi-million-dollar construction project, you should go out and solicit RFPs for the contracts, and you'll have a certain threshold, and it's going to depend on the industry. If it's government, it's probably going to be one threshold. For other industries, it may be a different threshold. Does anybody know what an RFP is?
Request for proposal.
Request for proposal.
Okay. So you guys aren't rookies. Okay. Unless you want your hand slapped, follow the documented procedures for getting requisitions signed off. Okay. There are many types of contracts that we'll explore a little bit of later. Some contracts need to be paid off at the time work is completed, or some can wait until the end of the project to pay. It depends on what the finance department prefers. It depends on if there's any discount that's available to the organization written into the contract. Okay. So you may be able to defer to the end of the project, but you may get enough of a discount if you pay it early. Huh. Okay, for predictive projects, you will have a procurement management plan that you'll create. You'll need to work with people in your procurement department and maybe even finance to put together this plan. Okay. They're going to be fussy about the documents that you can use when you're working with potential vendors. Why? Because 99.967% of the time, there will be a boilerplate that's been put out there by the legal department. Okay, so you need to respect that. Okay, so this plan is pretty straightforward. Specify the types of contracts that you're going to use. We'll talk about different types of contracts in a little bit here. You need to describe the process for obtaining and evaluating bids. There are many ways that you can solicit for bids, obtain the bids, and evaluate the bids. And it's going to depend on what industry you're in or whether you're in government, where the rules are a bit more stringent. As I said, you're going to have to live with the procurement documents that have been approved for the organization. And then the procurement management plan is going to describe how providers are going to be managed. Okay. These TLAs here, it'd be great if you could memorize them, understand what they're for. Okay. Expression of interest, request for information, request for quotation, and request for proposal. Everybody know what a TLA is? No penalty if you don't.
Can you repeat that? A PLA?
TLA.
License agreement?
I'm sorry, could you speak up? Couldn't hear you.
Some type of license agreement?
Nah, it's a three-letter acronym.
Okay.
Is it time and
That's
labor agreement?
No, it's three-letter acronym. All these are three letters. They're all acronyms. So if you ever see TLA out there, it's either a two-letter acronym or a three-letter acronym. Back when I was going to college, the computer center had a semi-regular publication. It was called Acronyms. And acronyms was an acronym for other acronyms, which are acronyms for other acronyms. So it was at least 3 layers deep. These are the ones you need to know. Your bid and proposal activities. Statement of work will be issued when the work is well known. That may be initially, it may be after It'll be used after times where you go through a request for information, request for proposal. Okay, to multiple vendors. All right. So all of these, a lot with government. If you still get a newspaper, most likely they still have to publish these in a newspaper, like an invitation for bid, a request for information. Okay. I know in the Chicago area, it's like the water department has to use that process. Okay. So the two that they were talking about mostly, statement of work and request for proposal. Now, as I said, there are some projects where you need to uh, go through a more formal process when you're looking for a vendor. A lot of the federal, state, and local government contracts will use something akin to a bidders conference. Now, bidders conference is an actual conference, either face to face or using something like Zoom or uh, a different type of conferencing. At uh, at the conference, the procuring organization will go through and list what's required to be delivered with uh, that with the contract. Okay. This is so that everybody has a common understanding of what needs to be delivered. Okay. Uh, I'll let you do a screenshot if you need to. So in all cases like with this, uh, understand that there may be other terms that are used for uh, the term that's listed. Okay. So on the test, they may have, they may use one term or another term. You'll need to know what they are. Um, what you're going to need to put together is a list of the criteria that you're going to use to make a decision. Okay. One big issue can be the overall or life cycle cost. A vendor may come in with a low bid to begin with, and then over the life of the product, discharge a huge amount for maintenance. Okay. Whereas another vendor may level that out so that the first one may look more attractive when you're first evaluating it, that you you need to be able to understand what the overall cost is going to be. You know, need to make sure that the vendor understands what you're asking for. If you're putting a bid out for a left-handed widget and they keep insisting that they only build right-handed widgets, I'd move on to another vendor. Yeah. Now there
Is
are
there
a
any
lot.
particular way to differentiate between those two different vendors, or how do you filter out what exactly you need?
You know what you need. Okay, when you're talking with the vendors, if they have a good understanding of what they need to deliver, I mean, you'll be able to tell when you're in conferences with them. If they understand what your organization's like, what your product line is like, and exactly what you need from this particular contract, it'll show through. I mean, if they don't understand any of those, you'll see a lot of the deer in the headlights look. Either that or they'll promise you the world. So you need to dig into it, ask a lot of questions. Any of this, anything that we're talking about is about what? It's the C word.
Cost?
No,
Contract.
nope,
Criteria?
nope. Everything we've talked about and everything we will talk about is about communications. So if a potential vendor can accurately communicate, their understanding of what you need from this contract, great, they're in the running. You need to get in there, ask the questions, make sure they understand. And it's about the same thing with any of these items where the like management approach, if you're looking for help on an adaptive project, if they only run predictive, it may be something to question. But these are all areas that you need to evaluate the vendor on.
Now, can you require them to have almost like a proof of concept beforehand? Before you say, okay, you get the bid, or you award the contract to them?
Oh yeah. That's what request for information or request for a proposal brings you. It's telling you what they understand and how they see it being implemented. Okay. One of the big things that sometimes slides through the cracks is financial capability of the vendor. Do they have the resources in their organization to fulfill this contract along with everything else that they're doing? If not, do they have enough money in the bank or enough credit to be able to get the resources that are needed? Okay, you can always ask them to provide letters from banks, what their credit line is. Okay. Business size and type, production capacity and interest. excuse me. If they're in one industry and you're in a different industry and they're bidding on a contract, you know, do they really, can they really fulfill what you need? You know, if they're a construction company and you're soliciting for software development, well, do we have a match or don't we? These are all areas where you need to formulate questions. Okay. IP rights with AT&T especially, we look at AT&T to be able to own the IP when it's produced by a vendor. Okay, got a screenshot? Okay. All right. If you've done similar projects, the organization has done similar projects in the past. You will most likely have a list of qualified vendors. Okay. These are ones that are pre-approved by your organization. They will have a history of working with the organization. Okay. Usually preferred because they have been proven to be able to deliver and their accounts are already set up. Now, there can be a lot of overhead if you have to set up new accounts for a new vendor. Now, this is where the lessons learned repository comes in. You should have lists of preferred vendors and how they've performed on the projects. But just because they're proven and their accounts are already set up, they may or may not be able to fulfill the requirements of the project that you have. And you've got to treat this as a strong suggestion, but make sure that what they are able to deliver is going to be what you need. So, question for you. What's the best kind of contract?
One that's signed.
Well, no, not quite the best. That goes along the way.
Time and money,
Say again, please.
time and money.
Well, it depends on the situation. It could be.
What are you asking in terms of what? What is the best kind of contract in terms of what?
Period. Best type of contract you can sign.
Talkable?
No. No.
One
You
that I
guys
don't
ever?
have to sign.
Yeah. There you go. No. Ever hear of a win-win contract? That's where both parties, or all parties involved in the contract, get something positive out of it. As a procurer, you don't want to tick off your vendors by trying to lowball them with everything. You may need to depend on them again. So as long as all parties can walk away with a positive result, those are the best contracts to have. Okay.
I think we call them buy, sell, contract relationship that we have here at AT&T.
Can you elaborate a little bit?
Well, I work in wholesale,
Okay.
so um, one of my customers, they buy from AT&T and we buy from them. So we have like what we call like a buy-sell relationship.
Okay. Okay.
So, you know, I just did an agreement where, you know, all parties was made whole from that agreement.
Okay. But yeah, something like that. It's a great example. Right? Anybody else want to contribute? All right, some general uh, things about contracts. Contracts are legal documents. It binds both the procurer and the vendor to the terms that are listed in the contract. Okay. Procure as to what needs to be delivered, when it needs to be delivered, and how much they're going to get paid for it. Huh. The procurer mostly is bound by the terms for payment. How much of a payment, when the payment's going to be, uh, if they're offering any incentives. Okay. It's a lot better than a handshake, especially with an organization that you really don't know. Right? So before a contract is finalized, you come up with what you need. Now, you do an RFQ, request for RFP, proposal comes back, and then you determine who you want to work with, and then enter into a contract with that particular organization. Okay. All right. We're going to go over 3 pages on types of contracts. Okay. Each of these would be used in a different situation. Okay. These are cost reimbursable contracts. So they involve payments, which are cost reimbursements to the seller for all legitimate actual costs and incurred for completion of work, plus a fee, which is the seller's profit. Okay. Going to have a cost plus fixed fee, where in the contract that fee is documented. If you have a change in the scope of the project, it may result in an adjustment to the fixed fee. Okay. There's also cost plus incentive fee. You'll see this a lot on construction projects where they're the procurer will pay for all costs and then have a structured set of fees for when if the vendor can deliver ahead of schedule. Okay. They'll have a fee for delivering on time, a fee for delivering a certain period of time before that, and have like 2 or 3 different fees that are written into the contract. The idea is that the time is extremely important to the procuring organization, and so willing to pay more to the vendor if the if the contract is fulfilled earlier than your drop dead date. Okay. You don't see too many of these cost plus award fee unless you're in the government. The seller reimburses for all legitimate costs, and then the majority of the fee is based on satisfying some suggested performance criteria. The criteria are listed in the contract itself. See this a lot with aircraft. The contract will have a minimum performance factor, and if the aircraft that's delivered exceeds those specifications, there can be a pretty good award fee. Now, one thing to note that these cost reimbursable contracts mostly used for projects with expected significant scope changes. Okay, where the initial requirements may be vague and then get tightened up as the project matures. So that if the procuring organization makes changes to the scope, then they owe more money. All right, these are fixed price contracts, firm fixed price. Okay, price of goods set at beginning won't change unless scope changes.
Harry, one sec.
Yeah.
In that last example that you mentioned, where the project can vary, how do you determine whether or not the contractor can do that particular project if you're making changes along the way?
You should have in your databases the performance of them or similar contractors in past projects. Yeah. If you're procuring a new airplane, see what Grumman has done, see what Boeing has done, see what Saab has done. And you ask a lot of questions. That's where you take a look at the books, you take a look at how many people are going to be assigned to it, when they could commit to deliver, things along those lines.
That's with you as the project manager, knowing that
Yep.
things will change along the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Project managers, typically in aerospace, in construction, have a lot more responsibility and than we've seen at AT&T. Okay. We've used project managers to maintain budgets, maintain schedules. very seldom do they get involved with any of the contract negotiations. Did that address what you had a question about?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. These are fixed price contracts. Firm fixed price contract. One example I have is in our first house, we were replacing the countertops. And so guy came out, measured everything up, gave us a price for them. Right? Well, we pulled off the old countertops, carried them down, you know, from the second floor, carried the new one up, put it in place, you know, where the sink had to be and everything else. And the guy did you know, a palm on his face, saying, "Darn, I mismeasured it again." He was an inch short on the piece of that was laminate that he did. So he had to redo everything and deliver it for the same price that we agreed on. Okay. Another firm fixed price is you go into a store, you buy a box of cereal. Do you negotiate the price on that? Or if you buy something off Amazon, those are the types, those are firm fixed price contracts. We also have fixed price plus incentive fee, right? I love how they list awesomeness as one of the agreed upon metrics. Okay. So again, this is a fixed price that you enter into between procurer and vendor, and list anything that you know, if the vendor delivers you know, above expectation, that there would be an incentive fee. All right. Another one of these is fixed price with economic price adjustments. Anybody think of an example where this would occur?
I would venture to guess what's happening right now with the cost of materials. If you're building a house, as the price of the material goes up, the contractor, yeah, at some point has to come back to the owner and say, I need more money because whatever we negotiated the first time, it's going to eat out of his cost.
Yeah, along those lines, say you've got a construction company that's building 100 miles of road. They're going to be using the same aggregate. They're going to be using the same reinforcements, you know, same rebar. They're going to be using the same concrete mix. The thing is, building 100 miles of road takes a few days, okay? Probably more than a year or 2 years. So what you want to have in your contract is if something skyrockets, in price, that will be covered, you know, that the vendor doesn't have to absorb that. Okay? At least 100%. You can negotiate, splits on that, like 50-50, 20-80, 80-20, however, whatever is equitable for both the procurer and the vendor. And our third types of contracts are time and material contracts. Yeah. This must be used in a different industry. I've never seen it used, but know that it can be time and means. With this, you have a more abstract statement of work that needs to be, for what needs to be delivered. And time and material means that you're going to be paying for the time that the vendor invests in the project, and also any of the anything that they have to use to deliver it. Can be anywhere from pencils and paper to laptops to cranes, bulldozers, whatever. Okay. All right. Oh, hold on. Let's cover the last point here too. It's often used for augmenting staff, acquiring experts, or gaining external support. All right. So please be familiar with the different types of contracts, at least so you can identify them, have an example of where they could be used, for the test. There are some different ways that contracts can be written for adaptive projects. Oh man. Excuse me for a second. All right. So where you have a statement of work, variable items, and then services that will be provided after the delivery of value. Okay. So the master service agreement would include such things as warranties, arbitration, um, fixed cost items that the vendor will provide. Okay. What agile types of contracts really emphasize is the value being delivered to the customer. Now, you may have the negotiate a contract that has specific value, or you may negotiate a contract for a specific amount of time that the vendor is going to be working on it, especially if you're going to have shifting requirements. Then fixed price increments where you have a number of increments that are funded, and if you can predict how much needs to be done in each one of the increments, then you can negotiate a contract where there's specific funding for each interval. There's the not to exceed time and materials, where it's a general budget that requires the vendor to deliver within a certain time period. And not not exceed a certain amount for materials. Now, in this case, project managers going to need to monitor all of the work to avoid any of the overages from the vendor. If you're going to add contingency hours, you may not want to tell them about that, because they'll tend to drag it on.
Question, Harry. Out of
Yeah.
Curiosity. This is a type of contract, or these are
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. You're down in the mud for me.
I was asking if this is a type of contract or this is requirement that are part of the contract.
This is a type of contract. Okay.
Other than the
Each
three types that we just looked at.
Those are mostly how historic contracts have been written. You'll still see it for predictive projects and for hybrid projects. These are some variations that could occur for agile project delivery. Okay. All right. One called graduated time and materials. This is similar to the fixed price plus incentives, where you agree on a price. Parameters are going to be quality and timely delivery of work. And this is not Department of Defense. It's what? What is DOD?
Definition of done.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. It's based on when it's delivered. Sooner is better. A lot of agile projects, adaptive projects. We reevaluate every iteration. Okay. And every increment that we're planning to. Okay. Or interval that we plan to. So that if something isn't working out, right, if the scope changes radically, you're allowed to cancel the contract for a fee, maybe $1, maybe $1 million. Okay. All right. Dynamic scope option is, again, scopes determined by the feedback from the customer. and it's evaluated at specific planning intervals. Now, team augmentation is the basic old body shop where you're running some bodies for a particular amount of time. Okay, so all right. So the team itself is funded, so you have one budget, okay, instead of the scope being funded. That's what we're trying to move to with agile work, where you have a team's funded for an extended period of time, and they turn out value as quickly at the highest quality that they can. All right. Components, contracts, description of what needs to be delivered, the date that needs to be delivered, who has authority to make any changes or to enforce any of the clauses of the contract, outlining the responsibility of both parties, how you're going to handle any technical or business uh, aspects of changes or the contract itself that weren't anticipated up front. Naturally, the price and payment terms, any provisions that exist for the termination of the contract. Can you terminate it early? Is there a penalty for that? And if so, lay out all the provisions there. Any guarantees and warranties supplied by the vendor? Where the intellectual property ends up. Does it end up with the vendor? Does it end up with the procurer? Yeah. Anything about security that has to be handled? Now, if we're talking about a vendor being able to see systems that have customer proprietary information, what kind of security do they need in place? Confidentiality. One of the great examples of that was the original iPhone contract, where both AT&T and Apple signed confidentiality agreements that didn't allow either one of them to talk about uh, producing the iPhones. Okay. And along what I was speaking about first was data privacy. All right. We're at the end of the first section here. Okay, so we're covered in the ECO, building a team, and then 211.1 through 211.5, and plan and manage procurement resources. Okay. Now, I set up here for the next section. Why don't we take about a 4-minute, 57-second break? Okay.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
Hey, Harry, if you're talking, you're on mute.
You guys are not getting the mind meld?
Unfortunately, not that good.
Okay. I think that's it. Okay. With predictive projects, you're going to put together a budget at the beginning of the effort. And any changes to that budget need to go through the change control process. Now, with hybrid approach, you're going to be delivering more frequently and have more of a chance for an opportunity to evaluate how the budgets is working. And you may not need to use the same rigid change control process if you have a change. Well, with agile projects, um, as I keep saying, ideally the team's funded for an extended period of time, say a year, okay, or fiscal year, and then delivers based on that funding. Okay, where there are some agile approaches where you're going to also have a budget that can change. Okay, where after certain deliverables, additional funding is added if the customer agrees that additional deliveries are needed. Now, they say you using the burn rate. Now, there are a couple of different uh, definitions of burn rate. You'll see if it's a purely agile effort, you'll see burn rate as the number of story points that are delivered. Okay. But for the exam, it's how the project's consuming financial resources. I'll notice that burn rate is representing negative cash flow, especially in a predictive project, because there's no cash flowing back to the organization until the total functionality is delivered. Okay, predictive planning. The project manager is going to create a cost management plan. Remember, you have a work breakdown structure, and then you enumerate the activities at each level. You're going to be assigning costs at the lowest levels all the way on up. Once you've completed that, you're going to construct what's called a cost baseline. That's what you predict it will take to deliver that project. And this is where especially cost baseline can only be changed through the formal change control process. Okay. So that once you come up with that budget, it's pretty tough to change it. Now, another term you need to know is budgeted completion. And that's the total amount of expenditure at the end of the project. Okay. Get your screenshots. All right. Here's an example. Cost baseline was created at the beginning of the project. Okay, it was estimated that it would cost this total to deliver the value from the project. Now, if you'll notice here, expenditures kind of track the line. but were less than what was budgeted for. Well, that was good until this point in time, where from there on, the expenditures exceeded what was budgeted for. Yeah. Now, if you have a predictive project, you're going to have one or more reserves that you need to lay out. In this case, there's just one, the management reserve. And what this is additional funding that isn't part of the basic project budget that can be used uh, for anything that came up, uh, any contingencies that need to be resolved. So in this case, it's still the management reserve was enough so that the value delivered by the project was greater than the estimate for the project itself plus the management reserves. So if you have management reserves or project reserves, they need to still allow the organization to make a profit or to fulfill whatever financial uh, uh, aspects of the project need to be. Okay. Now, what this shows is when funds are allocated along the product life. Okay. So at this point in time, the initial funding's done, then a bumps here, a bumps here, and a bumps here, and here. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay. This is in general. Start with what's known. In most every organization, you're going to have records of how either similar or close to similar projects have what they've cost, how they've been delivered, what the value that's been delivered is. Okay. So you want to check your lessons learned repository for budgets from previous projects. Okay. Dig into it a little bit more and look at cost estimating information, whether the costs, if the project was brought in under budget or over budget. You know, what happened? Why was that? Yeah. And most likely you're going to be able to find something that's close to what you're delivering or what you will be delivering. Okay. So use that history to form an analogous estimate. Remember we talked about analogous estimates. It was either Monday. Yeah, it was Monday. Huh. All right. Predictive projects, adapt projects. Okay. There's several components to the budget here. So when you're doing your estimates, understand what the availability of your resources are. Okay. If you need a second crane sooner than the vendor can turn it around, you may have additional costs going out to a second vendor, or giving your preferred vendor an incentive to turn around and supply the crane or the bulldozer or whatever. Okay. You're going to have average rates, and you're going to assume that that average will hold throughout the life of the project. So that is what to use for the initial estimates. Then you may need to modify it as you go through before you release your baseline. Same with adaptive, assign a blended rate. Assume that the cost will remain consistent. What you're going to do then is estimate the effort for the work. And that's really based on story points. And the way to do that is using planning poker, or an affinity diagram to find the number of user stories that can be completed based on the team velocity. And the team velocity is the historic measure of what the team has been able to deliver. Okay. What you'll end up doing is estimating cost per point. And then the estimated budget would be cost per point times total point value of items to be completed, plus any other expenses. Okay, so these are like team salaries, things like that. Okay. All right. So for predictive projects, estimating the costs, you have your work package, you break it down into tasks, other items, and you'll include a budget for each of those activities. Okay. These are components that should be included in each of those budgets at the lower level. And then we'll see the definition of contingency reserves, but it's additional funds to address known risks for that particular effort. Okay. Depends on your organization. They may be happy with a rough order of magnitude. So minus 25% to plus 75%, or you may be required to come up with a more definitive estimate, somewhere in the minus 5 to plus 10% ranges. Okay, and what you want to be able to do is evaluate the estimates along the way, and if necessary, go through the change control process to get a funding increase. With hybrid projects, you're going to be rolling both the predictive methods in here and the adaptive methods in here, so that you're going to be estimating, say, for example, a couple of planning intervals out. All right. And that'll give you a high level estimate of what value can be produced and how much it's going to cost for that value production. Okay. Hybrid and adaptive will go through and reevaluate each, at the very worst, each planning interval.
Now, do you have to have this included at the beginning of the project as far as our iteration when it comes to the adaptive portion? Should you have like, okay, we plan on having, or I plan on having so many iterations? Do you have to have them included, or am I making sense with the question I'm asking?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the maturity of the team, how long they've worked together, whether or not you have a baseline for their velocity. It may take 2 or 3 iterations before a good velocity can be determined. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, so you don't necessarily have to have it in stone at the very beginning. I know
No,
adaptive
you're
you
not,
can change.
yeah, you're not going to, yeah, you definitely do not have it in stone or cast in concrete at the beginning of the project. You can give a wet-fingered guess, but that's about where you're going to be. You'll at each planning interval, each time you reevaluate the budget requirements, what you want to use is the best information available at that point in time. Make your estimates and then, look out and see whether you were close on the estimate or whether you were farther off. Okay?
Yes, sir. Thanks so much.
Sure. All right. So this just reiterates what we talked about before, where you put together a baseline which consists of the work cost estimates. This is the labor that's involved, any of the equipment that is known. And then because our estimates are always, spot on, which establishes a contingency reserve. And that's for if things change a little bit or if our estimates weren't 100% accurate. Okay. So your overall project budget is going to consist of the cost baseline plus the contingency reserve. Okay, that's this right here. And then you will most likely have a management reserve sitting on top of that. That's for issues or things that management thinks may need to be addressed at the end of the project. If you've got a new piece of electronic equipment on a runway where you have to pass flight check, if it might, if it takes more than one flight check to accomplish that, you may be eating into the contingency reserve or the management reserve or both. Okay. Some guidelines and examples for adaptive and hybrid budget planning. You're going to be doing adaptive in iterative process. Okay. So
Sorry, Harry. I
Yeah.
have a question. Sorry. What's the difference between management and contingency reserve?
Okay.
I'm sorry, we're going back, but
No, that's okay. That's why I like questions. Okay. So contingency reserve plus the cost baseline. Okay, this is for things that you don't know about, or you have an idea that might bite you in the behind
Mhm.
during the life of the project. That is, these two components consist put together is the project budget. And ideally, since we're always so great at estimating things, uh, we establish what's called the management reserve. That's on top of the total project budget, just in case things are not able to be accomplished within the agreed to budget. Now let's go back.
Okay, thank you. So two
Well,
times contingency budget.
say again?
I mean, it's two, so management is also kind of contingency, right?
Yeah,
Management
yeah.
reserve is, yeah,
Remember this graph
yeah.
where the overall expenditures ate into the management reserve.
Yeah,
We're still less than the total management reserve.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah, thank you.
sure. Let's see. Okay. Your adaptive uh, budgeting process needs to consider what the total number of story points is for each of the iterations. So you can either focus on short-term budgeting, where there are a number of releases of funds that at uh, at the most refined level. That is per iteration. It would probably make more sense to examine it at a planning interval, end of a planning interval, or as I've said before, the entire team could be funded for an extended period of time. Okay. Um, using agile methods, you're going to have a backlog, uh, you know, product backlog and uh, uh, and a sprint backlog. Okay. So again, you'd uh, accumulate your costs over, say, a planning interval. Okay, and it can vary based on what still needs to be delivered. Okay, if you're honing in on the final product delivery, it can be decreased here so that uh, you don't under allocate or over allocate budget. Uh, for adaptive, I'm sorry, for hybrid projects, you want to estimate the budget based on your current data plus uh, a forecast algorithm. And that algorithm needs to be based on historic data or expert guidance. Okay. Uh, and these would be lean or Kanban examples. Uh, excuse me. What you want to do with in this case is to use a basically a top-down approach where you could estimate at the feature level and then further down to the story level. And you'd revise the budget at sprint planning intervals. And that planning interval could be either, like I said, the 2 weeks, or it could be the overall planning interval for that, over a multiple week period of time. All right. For adaptive projects, you need to give at least, I gave it away here. It's the last slide. Budget estimates be based on the time of the length of time of the project and how many people are on it, what the burn rate is, which includes the number of team members, whether you have some experts on there that have a higher run rate, or whether you're able to use a blended rate for doing the estimates. And time of involvement is either full-time, part-time, exactly how long they are involved with each iteration. Now, you can assume that it's full-time involvement from the entire team. You'll get a higher budget than if you try and break it down into individual rates plus the amount of time each individual at that rate is part of the project. Okay. And make sure that your budget includes everything, including like extra pencils and paper that you need. Everybody heard of pencils and paper? Yeah, just kidding. So if you need additional equipment or supplies, make sure you include that in your final budget. Now, there can be several control points on this. In some organizations, you'll see that the product owner can control the budget. In other organizations, you'll see that the project manager will control the budget. So it depends on team composition, and it also depends on the organization. All right, covered a few things in the ECO. 2.5.1, 2.5.2, and 2.5.4. Okay. Any questions? And no, I don't have the lottery ticket numbers. All right. Appreciate your attendance tonight, and hope you have a great, well, we won't see each other until Monday. Have a great weekend.
I'm sorry.
Thank
don't-
you, Harry.
And don't
Thank you,
scare the
Harry.
kids
Yeah.
when
Thank
you
you.
hand out the candy.
Thanks, Harry.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You too.